Chapter 11. While I was having my ups and downs with Tomas, I found a woman who did emotional release therapy. It was actually anger release therapy. I had spoken with her and I really was broke and didn't have money. She said she would trade me for fresh organic produce from where I lived, the store there, if I would come way out to where she lived, and she would give me therapy sessions. So when I first started talking about my family and issues in my family with her, I would just kind of laugh it off. That was how I dealt with everything. And she, once she saw me having a tiny, tiny bit of anger, just a tiny bit of emotion, she would hand me this plastic wiffle bat she had, and I was sitting on the floor and there was a pillow in front of me, and she would have me start beating the pillow. And that just opened up this whole world, like the floodgates just came pouring, or they came open and everything came pouring out. And I broke the wiffle bat. And I did a number of sessions with her, just screaming into the pillow and yelling and just all that stuff. You know, every time my dad was beating me and humiliating me or degrading me, and I had to hold it in, that was still inside eating away at me. And I was getting it out, and I was starting to feel more energy. I was starting to feel a little less depressed. I was walking a little taller. And that was causing more problems with my relationship, because now I'm standing up to Tomas more, and that's not what he signed up for. He wanted the pretty girl that just agreed with everything, and it didn't work that way. I was beginning to feel definitely very used by him sexually, like he cared more about that, I mentioned it earlier, than about my feelings and who I really was. And, you know, we had broken up, I think, at one point, and I had a roommate that I was living with, this guy who was a real sweetheart. He had just broken up with his wife and was going through a lot, and we both had kids around the same age. And so it was a great friendship that we had. We really supported each other, and we were reading these books on codependency, you know, and trying to help each other through our issues. And one day he took my son to the store with him, and I had been in African dance classes a lot, and I've been watching a lot of African women doing African dance, and a lot of them had no hair or shaved heads or very short hair. And I kind of envied how free they were, like, because African dance is wild. Like, you'd be flinging your head all over the place. And my hair was always whipping me in the face and getting in my way. And I really envied that freedom that they had. And on top of that, I was tired of being locked into this image. You know, I felt like my looks with Tomas was more important than who I was. And, you know, modeling had really damaged me in that way too, where I just constantly felt locked into this need to, you know, always be whatever, you know, posing or something. So while he took my son to the store and his kid, I went in the bathroom and I took a razor and I shaved my head. Now I really look like a Nazi, but that wasn't the point. I shaved my head, and my son was so shocked when he came home. But it was so liberating. It was one of the best things I've ever done. Just to live from the inside out and not the outside in. You know, like, frat boys stopped hitting on me. I started meeting much more interesting men. They were drawn to me. And I started being myself more. I started having more fun. I started, like, actually having a personality and just, yeah, being more fun. And so Tomas and I were, like, back and forth quite a bit. And I remember him even saying he thought I was really brave that I had shaved my head. And I think he was starting to get more and more intimidated by me, because I was starting to get stronger and stronger and put up with less and less of his bully. He definitely had a bully side to him, and he did things with my son that were really not cool, that I started having to put the brakes on him for that. And he would take my son to go on a trip with him, and because he was buying and selling a lot of stuff that for his business that he had at the time, and it was really into, like, Persian rugs and African trade beads and really cool stuff. But he would take my son with him and then just disappear, like not even call me. And then when he did call me, he'd tell me that my son was waiting for me at the bus station in Albuquerque, and he had sent him back with some hippie chick that I didn't know on the bus. And like a lot of things like that happened. And I was so desperate for help because I didn't have family or anyone to help me with him but his dad, until I got my roommate. And then when I got my roommate, we started helping each other more. But before then, there was a lot of things he did that were really uncool. But regardless, I still let my son go with him out of my desperation and probably out of my disconnection. I've actually gone back and read my diaries from back then and been kind of horrified that I knew how neglectful his father was, and I still let my son go with him. And I've apologized profusely to my son for that, who doesn't remember it. But yeah, it really wasn't cool. So I finally broke it off with Tomas and was feeling this really powerful call to go to Africa. Really powerful. I heard about an African dance camp there in West Africa and Guinea. That's the style of dance that I was really passionate about and wanted to study. And I was teaching also. So I scraped together my money over a course of a year, and I was barely, eating, barely making it and raising my son. And I had some dance students who wanted to go also, and I think they actually ended up coming up with part of the money to help me go at the end. And we all went to Africa. I left my son with his father, who was living in Taos, New Mexico, and he was selling all his arts and crafts stuff up there. And we went to Africa. It was so interesting because on the plane to Africa, there were some Africans on the plane dressed in like suits and, businessmen speaking with French or accents, or maybe they were speaking French. I think they were speaking French. And it was really shocking to me because up until this point, I had only seen Black Americans and, just what you see on TV. I'd never seen a Black person with a French accent. That was just so different to me. And I also kind of got depressed because I was so in love with the idea of natives, like people living close to the land, doing their traditional dances, wearing their traditional clothes. Like I fell in love with that life. I'd seen pictures of African kids with smiles like I'd never seen in America, like so deep. I was so touched from the first African dance performance I ever saw, just that pure feeling of just joy and rooted in this earthly connection, earthly connection. And to see these business guys that were totally modernized, I got kind of sad, and I was like, no, I don't want to go to Africa and see more of the modern world. I want to see the traditional world that I fell in love with. And so I got picked up at the airport by the guy who was the head of the dance camp, and instantly I felt a connection to him. His passion just oozed from him, very manly, African man. He took us back to his family's compound, and where we all connected, and my students, and there were some other people from other parts of the world there, or parts of the U.S., and we stayed there for a night, and then we took a canoe the next day. It was a motorized canoe that went through the ocean for about an hour, quite slowly, to the island that we were going to stay on, and that's where the dance camp would be held. And so we'd be camping out on the island in tents. And when the canoe arrived at the island, the African men from the island waded out into the water and picked all of us up, all the women, we were all women, and carried us to shore. And we set up our tents and started camping out. And the dance camp started, and we would have our classes on this big dirt floor outside under these huge trees in front of a large number of drummers. And it was just absolute bliss for me. And the African man, his name is Abdullah, he and I had started to talk and connect, and I was feeling something really strong for him. And one night we were talking, and I went to bed early, and I guess he had hooked up with another woman that same night. He went to talk to her and hooked up with her. And afterwards, he and I got involved, and then I found out that he had hooked up with this other woman. And I was furious, and I was angry, and it brought out all this emotion, and here I am reliving the same crap again. And he lied about it at first, and then he admitted it, and we continued to have this really passionate relationship, and I continued to also be angry, and there was this huge drama that went on. Meanwhile, the dance camp is going, and it's just like heaven on earth to me to be with Abdullah and still have that deep, passionate, earthy connection, and then to be on this island and have all this drumming going on, and to be able to be barefoot dancing on the dirt. It was just, it was so phenomenal. But my anger, I think, really started to damage me, and I started having all these symptoms and health problems. And one thing I forgot to mention was, before I went there, I did not take the malaria pills. I had always done everything naturally in my life and without medications. And I had talked to a woman who'd been to the camp before, and she's like, "Oh, you don't need it." So I didn't take it. And I started getting sick. I started getting really sick. Christmas Day, he and I went back to the mainland in a canoe to get some supplies for the Christmas party. And as we were coming back on the canoe, there was a group of Africans in the back, and some of them had drums, and they were singing and playing drums as the canoe was just slowly gliding through the water, and the sun was going down. And it was just, I felt like, with the singing and the drumming they were doing, it was so beautiful. I felt like I could have been any time in the past, hundreds of years ago. Just that feeling. It was so timeless and magical. And one of the boys on the boat actually said to me when we were looking at the moon, he says, "Is it true that a man has gone to the moon?" And you know what? Actually, I'm speaking in a really terrible accent, and I can't even remember if he talked to me in French, because I did speak some French. He probably did, because I don't think they spoke English. Sorry about that. But yeah, it blew my mind that I was in a part of the world where that wasn't an everyday reality for people, that someone went to the moon. So not too long after that, Abdullah took me to the village that he grew up in, and it was on the mainland. It was out in the country. So beautiful to me. And on the way there, just seeing the round mud huts, that's something actually I really bonded with Tomas over. We both had this strong desire to live in a round mud hut, and they were all over Africa. And when we went to his village, Abdullah introduced me to his grandmother, who's a medicine woman. And he showed me the house that he lived in, and the bed that he slept in when he was growing up, and the fields that he used to have to guard from monkeys at night, because they were rice fields. And he told me a crazy story about how at one time he was a teenager, I guess, and he was guarding the fields from the monkeys. And he was out there at night, and he saw these creatures walking around, and that were really strange looking. And he went and he told his grandmother, and he said that she smacked him and told him not to tell anyone, because they would think he was crazy. Many years later, when he went to live in Europe, he was watching a documentary on TV about Roswell, and it had a picture of the gray aliens. And he said that's exactly what he saw in that rice field. So it was pretty wild. I bonded with his grandmother. She took me in and said she claimed me as her granddaughter. And I cried so much when I was there, because I felt so loved. I felt such a connection to the land. I felt a connection to the people. I felt loved. I felt seen. It was so powerful, and I couldn't stop crying. They probably thought I was crazy. And then for New Year's, they were going to have a traditional New Year's party, and then the night after that, they were going to have a modern New Year's party. I started feeling sick, so I did not go to the New Year's party, the traditional one. The next night, I was feeling a little better, and Abdullah took me out, and what they did was they had actually set up a nightclub in the bush with generators and lights, and people were showing up at this nightclub in wigs and suits and heels and all this fancy clothes, and they were playing salsa music. And these Africans were dancing salsa better than Cubans. I mean, they were killing it. I mean, obviously, Cuban culture came from African culture, but, you know, salsa is a Cuban thing. And I don't know where they learned it, but they were killing it. It was so incredible to watch. It was really, really phenomenal. I had so many life-changing experiences when I was in Africa because of just the acceptance I felt from the Africans. I felt when they would look at me, so many of them, I felt like I was looking in the eyes of a deer. It was just pure. There wasn't all this judgment. I grew up with people who called themselves Christians, and even neighbors and people around me who were so full of judgment, and so not present, and so not accepting. And I'd never experienced being embraced like and witnessed like I felt from these Africans. And it blew my mind open because I thought, for the first time in my life, I was like, this is what Jesus was talking about. Because the way I was raised with Christianity, I didn't really get the Jesus thing because Jesus was crammed down my throat in kind of a negative way. And what these people demonstrated to me showed me something totally different and totally opened my mind. The other thing that happened was they were all Muslim, converted, you know, I guess to Muslim or semi-Muslim, I don't know, but they would sing their prayers. And I remember listening to them singing their prayers, and it was so heartfelt and genuine. And when I had lived in Paris, I had learned to really hate Muslims, or I thought, because of the Arab men that I ran into. And these Muslims were totally different. And it really made me stop judging. Like, I was like, this is beautiful. I can't judge this at all. Then we went back to the island, and I started getting more and more and more sick. And Abdullah took me to the doctor on the mainland. And the doctors told me that, well, at first they gave me some vitamins, actually, and I felt better. But then it got worse and worse. And then we went back to the doctors, and then they told me that I had malaria. And they gave me quinine to take for it. But the bedside manner was phenomenal. It was so gentle and loving, and I couldn't believe it. Like, I'd never experienced anything like it. And I was pretty impressed that they gave me vitamins, too. But when they gave me the quinine, by the time that I got it, I had already not been eating, and I'd been having severe sweats and headaches and everything. That the quinine, I got to the point where I couldn't walk, I couldn't eat. All the water I was drinking was getting sweated out. I was having horrible pains in my head and fever, and Abdullah had to carry me to the bathroom. And, you know, in Africa, the toilet is a hole in the ground, so he had to actually hold me up so I could take a dump. That's love, right? And he had to carry me to the bath and bathe me because I was so weak. And so by the time I took the quinine, my body was so unbelievably weak. And the quinine was just like poison. I felt like it was killing me because there was nothing in me. And I started feeling my heartbeat getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And I started realizing I was going to die. And at this point, I was so tired of all the pain I'd been through in my life. And I realized how my whole life I'd been trying to keep my head above water and trying to be positive and trying to be happy. And just there was a whole side of me that was suicidal my whole life, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know it until that moment because I was dying and I didn't care. I told my American friend who came to visit while I was sick, I was like, I'm dying and I just don't care. Like I'm like, there's something really wrong with this. And I had a son, but I was so tired and I was so tired of the pain and I felt like I was just barely keeping my head above water. And I realized that was really wrong and I started praying. I was like, God, just give me a reason to want to live, to want to fight this, because I didn't. And right after I prayed, Abdullah's mother came in the room and they were all outside freaking out, praying for me and really scared. And she came in the room and she was just so flabbergasted, like, what do I do? So she just sat down next to me and she just grabbed my head and just put it in her lap. And I felt her flood me with love. I just felt this love just pour into my body. And in that moment, I realized that I had never, ever felt that from my own mother. I didn't even know I was missing it. And then I realized, oh my God, life's hard, but if you have love, you can get through it. And I wanted to be able to give that to my son. And before all of that happened, you know, when I was contemplating dying, you know, I thought, wow, am I really going to just give up? Like, if I'm going to die, I should go out with fireworks. I shouldn't just, I mean, this is too easy. It's easy to die. I really had an epiphany. Like, death is, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's easy. You just basically go to sleep. It's like, I want to live. And then I started praying, and then she came in, and then I had that experience and that awareness. And then right after that, Abdullah came in the room with some doctors he had found, and they gave me an IV because I was severely, severely dehydrated, and it brought me back to life. And I went back to the States and had ended up going to a malaria doctor in the States, and the difference between treatment was night and day. That doctor spent like minutes with me. He was way too busy for me, and gave me some medication that started having really bad side effects. And when I researched them, one of the side effects was death. So I stopped taking it because of my own research, and this guy couldn't even give me the time of day. And it really was interesting.